Okay, folks, we're gonna get our meeting underway here. This is the regular monthly meeting of the Alameda County Water District, June 8th, 2023, 6 p.m. And I would like the general manager to start us off with some housekeeping, and then we'll go to roll call.
Sure. Welcome, everybody. On behalf of the ACWD Board of Directors, my name is Ed Stevenson, and I serve as the district's general manager. Members of the public who we have here this evening, which is great, may participate in this board meeting in person or remotely by either using the Zoom application or by telephone. Any member of the public present in person who wishes to make comments may approach the speaker's podium at the appropriate time, which is in just a couple minutes. For those participating remotely, note that the meeting agenda, staff reports, presentation materials for this meeting are all available on the district's website at acwd.org. And President Sethy, that completes my housekeeping remarks.
Okay, thank you. And I would ask the district secretary to please take the roll.
Directors Gunther,
Here.
Akbari,
Here.
Huang, Weed,
Here.
and Sethy.
Here. And so Director Huang will be absent for this meeting. And so may I ask, let's say, Director Akbari, how would you like to lead us in salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, at this time, we will turn to public comments. Members of the public may address the board on any issues not listed on the agenda, which are within the purview of the Alameda County Water District. And we normally give up to a 5-minute limit. It's customary. However, I, as board president, may adjust the actual time allotted to accommodate the speakers. Members of the public who wish to address the board on a scheduled agenda item will be given the opportunity to do so when that item comes up. So do we have anybody who has or who is willing to speak this time?
Geraldine, you're certainly welcome to share comments. The board has received. Okay, no problem. No problem. Okay, not a problem.
So we don't have anybody on our Zoom link that I can see, or public link, right? So, Ms. Geraldine, I just quickly read your letter over here. And while you're unable to actually address the board informal, thank you for submitting the letter. And I'm going to ask our general manager to follow up with you. This sounds like a very complicated situation, and it doesn't sound like you're really responsible. And so let's see what we can uncover about what actually happened. See who's responsible for payment or customer reimbursement here.
And perhaps if I could ask just for clarification, the letter that we have asks for a response to Jack Alcorn. I think that's you, sir, in the audience.
Yes, my name is Jack Alcorn. I work for Tri-City Voice. We serve 7 Southeast Bay communities of Hayward, San Lorenzo, San Leandro, Sonoma, Milpitas, and Union City, Newark, and Fremont. We cover news and events and also city councils and government bodies to provide information to the public. So we received this letter May 4th from Geraldine, and I've distributed copies to each of you, and we're just hoping that you could provide a response potentially to the letter.
Sure, I'll be happy to look into this issue and respond. I can respond to you, Mr. Alcorn, as I have your email account. I don't have information about Geraldine at the moment, but if you'd like me to work through Mr. Alcorn, I can certainly do that.
Ms. Geraldine, it would be very helpful if we had your full name, address, phone number, email address, and even account number.
You've got a landline.
That's my contact. We should be happy to. You feel free to contact me. We'll start with Mr. Alcorn and then we'll go from there. Okay, thank you.
I think it's fair to note that we do have programs to provide relief in circumstances where there's an accidental or sudden release of non-consumed water. And I'll let the staff look into it and determine and explain what those programs are.
We'll certainly try to rectify the situation, okay? I want to make that absolutely clear. So at this time, and Mr. Alcorn, you're more than welcome to attend our entire meeting. We would love the press coverage. So we will turn to our consent calendar, and I'm going to ask if a board member would like to add items to the consent calendar, but before so, I myself would like to remove item 5.5 just for a very brief discussion.
I'll make a motion to add items 5.1 to 5.4 and 5.6 to 5.10 to the consent calendar.
Second. Secretary.
Directors Gunther, Akbari,
Aye.
Weed,
All right,
and Sethy.
Aye.
I'll make a motion to adopt the consent calendar as amended.
Thank you. Second.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Weed,
all right,
and Sethy.
Aye. So let me open up 5.5. First of all, I really wanted to compliment the staff on making this adjustment to our long begun program. Going from customers to sites for the commercial, industrial, institutional accounts, I think is a very progressive step for the district. And then going from customer to actual account for residential is also an important move. So thank you, staff. I know a few years ago when I asked that we work with Kaiser Hospital on redoing all of their landscaping, and we had multiple meetings with them, with our staff, that was one of their complaints, that they had much more ambitious ideas about turning their turf into native landscaping. But we couldn't accommodate them at the time. So second, I have a question. Of the amount that's being allocated for future work, is this money that's coming from BOSCA, other grant money, district money, or is it a combination of all three?
That's probably best answered. I'll start with Mr. Nizer, who's filling in for our Director of Water Resources this evening.
So for the most part, it's going to be it'll basically come from the mix of funding. It'll basically come from the mix of funding that we use for this program. We're just expanding the eligibility. So we seek grant funding where possible. Otherwise, it's typically funded from us. But BOSCA is part of the administration. So ultimately it comes from our conservation budget.
Okay. That's what I suspected. I didn't know if we had received some kind of special grant for expanding our program. Doesn't sound like.
Not at this time, no.
Okay, and the third thing I wanted to mention was early this year, the state water board for the first time handed out grant money to a handful of water districts for putting in direct install programs. And I would like to make sure that our district is one of those early districts in California that can initiate one of those programs, and that we make every effort to put in a grant application before the end of the year, spelling out exactly what we would like to do under such a direct install program. And for those that are not aware of what that is, and what the difference is between what we're doing now and a direct install. Currently, customers have to go through a fairly arduous application process and approval process before they can actually take out their current landscaping and put in native California landscaping or drought tolerant landscaping. And the reimbursement on all of that work that they're paying for may not occur for 3 or 4 months until after they are done with the project. And for a lot of low-income people in our communities, this is not a practical way for them to put in new landscaping. And it's also, in this boardroom, we periodically have Saturday events where we're teaching people how to put in landscaping, native plants. And often the question I'm asked is, where do we go for these type of plants? Who can we bring in as a landscaper that's knowledgeable enough to lay it out nicely for our yard? And third, where do we get the right contractor? There's all these questions that people bring up, and it becomes a very laborious exercise for people. Under a direct install program, the district is giving grant money, just like we have grant money on the current programs. And then the district sets everything up. So a customer only has to call and say, I want my yard replaced. And then the district can assign a contractor, landscaper, somebody that can pull in the right plants from a couple of different nurseries or whatever. And then it's done very expeditiously, and the customer doesn't have to worry about anything. And I think that's the future in our state. And so I would like to be one of those early agencies that adopts this kind of program. So I'm just encouraging staff, please try to get a grant application in. Are there any other comments from the board here?
Yes, and I know much I raised at our Water Resources Committee, last Water Resources Committee meeting, was a request that we, or a consultant, review each of the city's ordinances on land development, landscaping, see if cities are requiring developers on soil landscaping, which we in turn then will pay them to remove in place. But there are the city ordinances are in conformance with our guidelines and the efforts to provide water efficient landscaping.
Thank you. Director Akbari? Okay, well, I hope I have the support of the board on this request to staff. Okay, good. So we'll close item 5.5. There's no, I think we have to go back for a vote now. So may I ask for a resolution?
I'll second.
Gunther.
Aye.
Akbari.
Aye.
Weed
Hi,
and Sethy.
Aye. So moving on to item 5.11, this is the adoption resolution adopting the fiscal year 2023, 2024, and fiscal year 2024, 2025 budget and the 25-year capital improvement program. So I'll turn it to staff to give us the details here.
Thank you, President Sethy. And of course, this item follows some work with the Finance Committee and also our budget workshop that we had on this topic last month, where we went through things in much greater detail. So here staff is planning to summarize the overall budget and proposals by staff. But I'll turn it over to Mr. Wonderlich to get us started, our Director of Finance and Administration.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stevenson, and good evening, members of the board, staff and public. We first presented the preliminary proposed budget to committee back in April, and then a few weeks ago on May 16th, the board of directors reviewed the proposed fiscal year 23-24 and fiscal year 24-25 budget and 25-year capital improvement program. Staff responded to questions from the board and incorporated board guidance from that workshop into the proposed budget that's before you this evening. And so, what's really in front of the board now is formal adoption of the budget, and Mr. Alm, our financial analysis supervisor, is here to provide kind of an abbreviated version of the presentation that was provided back at the workshop to provide everybody with an overview of what's included in the budget. And so, adoption of this item will help meet our strategic plan goals 3.2, ensure cost reasonableness, and 3.3, promote financial transparency. And the recommendation for this item is by motion to adopt a resolution approving the fiscal year 23-24 and fiscal year 24-25 budget and the 25-year CIP. And so with that quick overview, I will turn it over to Mr. Alm to walk us through our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Wonderly. Good evening, members of the board and members of the public. Welcome, staff. I've heard a couple of mentioning of brief and summary, so I'll try to be brief because most of these have been presented to you already at the May budget workshop. So here's our agenda. Budget assumption, we'll review the assumption that we reviewed at the workshop, provide any updates that were made since the workshop. We'll review the proposed budget for the next 2 fiscal year, high level review, as well as review the 6 key metrics from our long range financial planning model. We'll conclude with staff recommendation. So this graphic highlights and illustrates the district 2-year budget. So the district adopts a 2-year budget. The current budget process started in December. It's a 6-month process. So before you this evening, for board consideration and adoption, it's the 2-year budget. Staff will come back and review with the board at the beginning of next calendar year, around February, the mid-cycle budget after this 2-year budget is adopted by the board. Here's the key assumptions. So the budget and the long-range financial planning model includes some really key assumptions. No changes from what was discussed with the board in the May budget workshop. So I'll be very, very brief. Updated the water demands to align with water resources projections and the water purchase budget. Both the budget and the long-range financial planning model assumes a 4% rate increase annually in the out year. Full funding of our capital improvement programs with some really big programs for infrastructure replacement and seismic improvements, as well as the water supply reliability projects. The budget includes the rate increase by SWC 9.7% effective to July. It also includes labor related costs that are consistent with the current labor contracts, as well as maintaining the aggressive contribution for pension and retiree health directed by the board.
Mr. Owen, if I may interrupt, and I say this solely in the interest of the public, and especially since we have local media here, that this 9.7% rate increase effective July 1 of this year is on top of a 16.9% rate increase last July 1.
Correct.
So the cost of water from our own suppliers is escalating very quickly right now. And this is entirely due to all of the capital improvement projects that have been implemented over the last few years in the billions of dollars on the Hetch Hetchy system. Thank you.
I mean, that was a $6 billion water supply improvement program beginning 20 years ago. In that period of time, the water rates in San Francisco have increased by more than 500%.
Thank you.
Thank you. So like I said, the last slide, no changes. So as requested by the board at the May budget workshop, the proposed budget includes $25,000 in annual contribution to Aqua Foundation to support workforce and leadership development in the water industry, with a focus on attracting diverse workforce to the industry. This is an overview of the total revenues for all funds. So we'll look at total revenues. The next slide, we'll look at total expenses and then the cash balance. So this is revenue. You look at different major revenue categories. Again, there's no changes from what was presented in May. Total revenues for the next 2-year proposed budget, $156.8 million in fiscal year ending 24, and $164.3 or $164.2 million the following fiscal year. I wanted to note that the fiscal year ending, the current fiscal year ending estimated revenue is $165.2 million compared to the amended budget, 159. So it's $5.5 million higher revenues projected for the current fiscal year. This is the total expenses for all funds. It is listed by different cost center, source of supply, pumping, water treatment, transmission and distribution, customer account, administrative and general, and then the expense project. So the total expenses for including capital projects, debt service, and customer capital contribution for next fiscal year, the proposed 2-year budget is $181.9 million for fiscal year ending 24, followed by $187.7 million in total expenses district-wide and all funds for fiscal year ending 25. Again, note current fiscal year estimated actual is about $13 million lower than the amended budget. So at the beginning of the fiscal year, we projected our expenditures based on what we knew then. So we're in June now, so we're projecting to have the total expenditures at $162.8 million. This is the total cash balances. The district prepared the budget on a cash basis, so cash balances for each of the fiscal year, including the beginning balances and the ending balances. The current fiscal year, fiscal 23 estimated actuals of $208.8 million. That's in the middle of the column there, compared to $202.3 million. So budget adoption or budget amendment, beginning cash balance was $202.4 million. But we're estimating at the end of the current fiscal year, the district will should have the beginning balance of $208.9 million. So we started the beginning of the fiscal year higher estimated cash balance. Over the next 2 fiscal years, the district plans to use or utilize the reserve as part of the planning process. So the ending cash balance at the end of the 2-year budget is going to be estimated to be $162.6 million, down from $221.2 million. So the district plans to utilize about $49 million in reserve for the 2 budget. So the district maintains very healthy reserve, and as well as debt coverage ratio, as you see here. So we have different reserve for different purposes. This is in compliance with the reserve policy that you approved earlier as part of the consent calendar this evening. Our debt service coverage is very strong. So district policy is to maintain a debt coverage ratios of 200%. As you see there, the second to the last line, the district debt service coverage is well over 200% target. So very financially strong. This will allow the district to issue an additional debt if needed, and our financial planning model will assume some debt issuance. And this includes that as well. So this pie chart looks at, just provide the general public, the general fund expenses for the next fiscal year, fiscal year 24, totaling $171.7 million. So the purpose of this slide is to look at each cost center and show a breakdown or breakout of the labor component for each of the cost center. Some cost center has higher labor component. Other cost centers such as source of supply or again capital projects. It's mainly the allocation would go to directly to the projects and not so much to labor. So that's the purpose of this slide. This is for fiscal year 24. So if we look at all the total labor costs for general fund, it's about 35% of general fund budget for next fiscal year. This is the same slide, as I mentioned, it's a 2-year budget. So we look at the fiscal year ending 24. Here's fiscal year ending 25. The labor portion doesn't change. It's still 35% of the total proposed general fund budget, and broken out by different cost centers. See that. So that's operating budget. And here we're looking at capital expenditures. We're also looking at adopting a 2-year spending plan for our capital program. This shows the different plan expenditures for different funds and different type of capital improvement program. So total or grand total capital improvement program for the next 2 fiscal years, at the right column there, is about $112 million, $120 million, I'm sorry. So this slide was presented, workshop. We thought it's important to look at this, just to give a picture of our plan for the next 10 years, the different proposed CIP expenditure by different program. The green is called other capital. So the next slide will show what that is, but for the current 2 fiscal year 24 and 25, those projects are for other project that's not that doesn't fall into those category. PFAS treatment is one of them. Reservoir roof replacement is another. So there's also Carol. So there's some major projects over the next 2 years that don't necessarily fall into one of those programs. So this next slide, again, we want to kind of point out what the other capital is. And the amount that you see here for these programs, these are for the 25 period horizon. ACWD, for example, is under $25 million over the 25-year time frame. Right. So now we're looking at, so that was part of the budget. So here we're looking at the financial planning model. So as part of the race process, the district also look at long term. And typically, we looked at the last 2 actuals, right? 2 prior year actuals, and the current fiscal year, which is the fiscal year 23, and then 5 years into the future. So the top chart here is our general fund ending balances. It is the most important fund of all. And so what this shows is that the district has a very healthy cash balance in the current fiscal year, about 3rd column to from the left there. So the district, as I mentioned earlier, plans to spend its reserve to fund primarily its capital program. So by the end of the planning horizon, so our focus is over the next 5 years. The general ending balance is anticipated to be about $2 million above the reserve target. So again, it falls below about 400,000, but then the next following year, in fiscal year 28, it is $2 million above the reserve target, and we don't want to go below that at the end of the planning horizon. Thank you. And then the metric below there is the projected bill demand. Again, as mentioned, we updated this. So as you notice, we assume that the drought, there's a drought rebound over the 5-year horizon over the next 5 years. So that's our current assumption. So that the planned water purchase amount that's included reflects the higher bill demand. So the long-term demand is at 36 million gallons per day. These are, so the district looks at these metrics to help us look at our operating revenues versus operating expenses, including depreciation, and look at rate and charge revenues, compare that to our revenue requirements, including debt service. So the takeaway here from the top chart is that on average, on an annual basis, the operating revenues for the district is sufficient to cover operating expenses, including depreciation. So you see the line, the red line falls above the operating expenses, the blue bar. The bottom chart, look at the rate revenues, rate charge revenues, and then compare that to revenue requirement. That's really our operating, general operation and maintenance, including debt service. The red line, which is the rate revenue, is above the revenue requirement. So we're in good shape there. The district can meet its revenue requirement from rate revenue. However, district needs to fund general fund capital projects. So the district relies on other funding sources, such as property tax, interest earning, in addition to the water and rate charges, in addition to using the accumulated reserve to meet the revenue requirement, as well as funding the general fund capital projects that you saw earlier on the slide, previous slide. So this is looking at debt coverage ratio shown in the previous slide. The district policies to maintain 200%. That's net revenue divided by the annual debt service. As you can see at the top chart there, that district coverage ratios are well above 200%, and that includes the assumed debt issuance to fund capital projects, which are assumed in the long-range financial planning model in fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2028, totaling $45 million. As you see there, bottom metrics, or CIP and funding sources metric. So staff recommendations, by motion adopt a resolution approving the fiscal year 2023-24 and fiscal year 2024-25 budget and the 25-year capital improvement program.
Thank you, Mr. Huang.
Thank you.
First, are there any questions from the public here present in the boardroom or online?
I'll note, President Sethy, that the person attending online is actually a member of staff, Martin Coran, who you remember from the board workshop. I think he's trying to make sure that we stay on the straight and narrow here and monitor activities. So I think at the moment, the sum total of our public is here in the room with us.
Okay. So I'll turn it over to the board. Start with my co-finance committee member, Director Weed.
Thank you. I'm also on the finance committee for ACWD. We've gone over this in some detail. But this is the first time I've seen this full presentation. First of all, a general comment. I find it interesting that there's what we call a planner's droop. And it seems over the years, every time I've seen our presentations, the bars are well above the target, or the target's well below the bars in the near term, but levels out and hits the target in the out years. It's as if we could take that same chart and shift it annually, because we're always doing better in the near term, and we have a longer term, more conservative outlook. So for the near term, we're in very good shape. And I suspect in past practice, we'll be in very good shape the next several years going into the future in the near term. See out-term projections, which we think are more conservative. This year, one of the charts showed $16 million deficit that we would have to use reserves. That was the budget. In fact, we came about $2.3 million to the positive. That has been somewhat of a pattern. Next, there was our capital improvement projects. We have LD, Los Vaqueros, where we want to put approximately 9,000 acre feet of dedicated storage and participate in an 8-foot diameter pipeline called the Bethany Transfer Pipeline feeding into South Bay Aqueduct. We have budgeted $125 million for that project, our share. But there are three options. That is the full course, which we have to make a decision on before the end of the year. One is to work only the pipeline. Second is the pipeline is some operational storage. And third is the dedicated storage, which ironically Contra Costa is not participating in, saying they don't need the additional storage. And this is Los Vaqueros is in the Contra Costa Water District. And we will be reimbursing Contra Costa for the work that they did in building the first two lifts of that dam. This is the third raise. I would hope that we could have a breakout that shows a general rough estimate what cost would be for each of those three options. Next, I would hope that we could do a split in the volumetric cost versus the non-volumetric cost. We show labor as part of the water supply, but is that not a fixed labor cost and that's applicable to the supply of water? When we base our rates, we have two portions. One is the service charge and the other is a commodity charge. I believe that my argument for years and ad nauseum here that the commodity charge should be 100% volumetric and the service charge should cover the services. We have at most 1/3 of the chart of our cost are volumetric. It's probably less than that. 2/3 of our costs are fixed. But we invert those ratios with our bill and our water rates. And that was been 1 year we did show that inversion. 1 year we showed that 95% of the rate increase was going to go toward fixed cost needs and 5% toward volumetric. And we stayed with the 2/3 fixed, 1/3 variable in our rates and didn't make change. Hopefully we can overcome that bias. It goes back to a best management practice inflicted on us by the environmental community and Natural Resources Council. We couldn't get grants unless we overbilled on the commodity side. Call it the overstay approach for water policy. You need to be a true believer in conservation after inflict pain and suffering. And undercharge on what our fixed services were. As a result, we cannot do the best we can do is a 2-year budget. In comparison to Union Sanitary District, which has a 5-year budget, 5-year rate determination. Only go through the 218 process once every 5 years, because theirs is all fixed in charges building. We were doing the same and could be able to be reactive. We could also do a much longer budget. So those are my comments.
I don't really have much in the way of questions or comments. I think what we've seen today is pretty much exactly what we saw at the workshop. And so I made a lot of my comments and asked questions then. I appreciate the work that went in by staff and putting in the feedback that you got back. Thank you.
Director Gunther.
First, I'd just like to point out that it's hard to target the budget. PFAS just popped up out of nowhere. You know, a few years ago, not very long ago, you couldn't measure it down to parts per trillion. PFAS requirements are parts per trillion. And we're talking billions of dollars for treatment. That was added to our budget. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was like since practically last year. 40 million. Yeah, 40 million, somewhere in that range. It's hard to budget. We do a pretty darn good job. Second, Los Vasqueros, still in schedule. The plan is still being negotiated. We don't know the finance outcome of that yet, and staff is doing a great job there. We're still at the table. We need to be at the table. And I got a comment on the service charge. I'm sorry. We've had this discussion. You're correct. Multiple times. And every time I will say, and I'm going to say it tonight for the record, our service charge is right where it should be. We know how much water we're going to sell. We found that out back in I think it was 2017 during the drought. The last drought we had, yes, we put on a surplus charge, I can't think to what we even called it now, but it worked. We were targeted. We were right where we had to be. We know how much water. If you put everything on the service charge, and this is going to be for another meeting, that's wrong. It's not just volumetric. Portions of that service charge need to be included in the volumetric charge. What that portion is, I'm not 100% sure because it's a real mismatch equation, but it's not as simple as you say. And I've heard that comment multiple times. And so this evening I'm coming out and saying, look, it's not that easy. And we're going to have this comment, we're going to have this discussion multiple times again, just saying. And the last, and that's basically where it is. I appreciate what the staff has done. In our last committee meeting this week, we talked about chemicals. Chemical costs have gone through the roof. 4%. I know some people didn't like our 4% word. We weren't even basically at inflation. And the chemical costs. A lot of people didn't know during the pandemic, we were getting close. The water industry was getting close to running out of chemicals. So the staff's done a great job. They continue to do a great job. They support the budget. And we'll have the other out in the future, certainly. I look forward to it.
If I would note that if we knew how much water we were going to sell, we would not have a drought surcharge.
Actually, we came in right on budget with the drought surcharge, so we did know.
Only because we have the drought surcharge because we had a shortfall.
I'm not gonna make that.
We didn't sell as much water.
So let me make a few comments here. Director Weed and I have sat on the finance committee most of the last 13 years together. So I want to build on top of Director Gunther's comments. We just went through the water operations and water quality committee meeting on Tuesday. And I think both of us were somewhat in shock as to looking at it graphically from 2017 up till now, the sharp increase in chemical costs. In some cases, it was 150 to 250%. And these are on our primary chemicals. And then you see where the cost of supply of water is going with, like San Francisco, 25% in 2 years. And then all of a sudden out of the blue, we have to invest at least 40 million right now, and perhaps as much as 100 million for PFAS cleanup in our groundwater, which we didn't cause, and for which we are not receiving. We're receiving mandates from the government, state and federal, but no one's giving us any money to actually do the cleanup. I honestly feel that we need some kind of congressional action on a super fund for water districts throughout the country, much like we had a super fund that was set up under EPA back in the 1970s. But that we'll just have to keep pushing on that. In reference to our proportionate difference between the service charge and the commodity charge. Over a dozen years ago, we were at less than 10% on the service charge and most of it on the commodity charge. And when I was elected to the board, one of the first actions I asked for was 100% increase on the service charge. And then another 100% increase on the service charge. Because I argued to the community that we cannot have a district that's running on a roller coaster ride through every drought and every recession, and sometimes both at the same time. That what we need as a district is a predictable, reliable revenue stream. And if we don't manage ourselves properly, we could easily be taken over by a private water company. So we went from below 10%, and we just went through these financial workshop exercises where we're up to about 37% solid, dependable revenue between our service charge and property tax revenue, and the rest is variable. But the truth is that we now are at the point where about 85% of our revenues are predictable. And the extra 15%, which is addressable, like through the drought surcharge that we had, effectively, in the last 2 fiscal years, we came within 1% of our forecast, which is just, it's unheard of in government to get that close, unless you've got really good staff and people that between looking at demand for water and across customers, commercial, residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, I think that we did a very good job of forecasting. And I have spent my career in Silicon Valley, and there's hardly a company that major companies that I've worked for, that can get that close on their corporate forecasts. So I know we're doing a good job. And like Vice President Gunther, I feel that the service charge is right at the sweet spot. We don't need to make any adjustments to it. I fought for the service charge to be increased substantially over time. And I feel that we've gotten there to right where we need to be. So I want to thank the staff on a couple of areas that I thought were really very healthy to go through and gave me a lot better, deeper understanding of what we're doing as a district. And that was laying out the spreadsheet over the 25-year capital improvement horizon. And when you're looking at this district investing, close to $1.5 billion into our community, these are things that most people never see. And a lot of our infrastructure is below ground, our horizontal infrastructure. And right now we're going through a lot of upgrades on our vertical infrastructure because our reservoirs are nearing end of life. And so we're one by one, we're going through replacement on that. We have 900 miles of pipeline. And we're the oldest county water district in the state. And our pipeline system is aging out as well. And so not only do we have to make investments in pipe replacement and renewal, but I firmly believe we need to accelerate it. We need to figure out strategy for trying to subcontract work out if we can to get the work done that's needed in the community, and especially the seismic retrofitting that's required, because that large quake on the Hayward Fault that last happened in 1868 is bound to come again, and we need to be prepared for that. So I thank the whole finance staff as well as everybody in the other departments in our district, because every department comes together to pull together our budget and our financial forecasts. It's engineering, it's water resources, it's operations. And so we don't have much community here to see what we're doing tonight, but as representatives of the community, I think you have the full appreciation of this board, including Director Huang. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment.
So I would ask for unless there's any other comments?
I do a rebuttal, but
Don't beat a dead horse.
other time, so let's go on.
All right, do I have a motion for approval of?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
I'll second myself, 5.11.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. So we'll turn to item 5.12, authorization of professional services agreement for the development of an ACWD water resources master plan.
All right, thank you, President Sethy, and we're happy to be moving forward rapidly in this work. But for this item, I'll turn it over to Mr. Nizer. My search here just.
Thank you. Okay. So the district seeks to update its water resources master plan, the 1995 integrated resources plan. The updated plan will serve as a long-range planning document to outline the district's water supply strategy, inform future infrastructure and water supply investments, and support compliance with the Urban Water Management Planning and Sustainable Groundwater Management Acts. The updated plan is expected to have a 20 to 30-year outlook. Development of the plan will be guided by the Board of Directors' input on policy objectives and agency priorities, which will be informed by stakeholder and public input. The plan will be developed in 2 phases and is expected to take approximately 2 years to complete. Currently, staff is proposing use of professional services to conduct phase 1 of this effort. There's adequate funding for this expenditure included in the proposed, now adopted, 23-24 and 24-25 budgets. This item was reviewed with the Water Resources and Conservation Committee on May 24th, 2023. Approval of this item will help meet the district's strategic plan goals 2.1, maintain and enhance sustainability and reliability of local and regional water supplies, and 2.4, plan for future water supplies. The recommendation of staff is by motion to authorize the general manager to execute a professional services agreement with Woodard and Kern an amount not to exceed $284,420 for consulting services for the development of an ACWD water resources master plan, job number 10008. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the public first? Seeing any, we'll turn it over to the board. Anyone can start off first if they wish. Okay, go for it.
Can you give us a kind of a rough walkthrough and timeline of what the process will entail for developing the water resource master plan?
Certainly. The proposal is to pursue the study in 2 phases. Phase 1, which is one discussion right now, is really a grand scoping phase, if you will, and will entail a series of board workshops as well as public workshops and stakeholder workshops to elicit input to establish the priorities for the community to use as the foundation for developing a master plan, which will have a 20 to 30 year outlook. It'll take advantage of well-formed stakeholder groups, but also the use of public surveying to get as broad of input from the community as possible. And it's hoped that within the span of a year, we'll be able to put together the fundamentals for direction for more detailed studies in phase 2, which will be another process, an RFP. But that will then constitute the recommendations for the next several decades.
So in terms of our plan to solicit feedback and input from the community and from various stakeholders, have we identified how we're going to go about trying to entice people to participate in the process?
That's a great question. That's really going to be one of the fundamental first steps. And one of the things we interviewed the proposals heavily for their approach on that. The district does have an existing stakeholder list, and there are some best management practices for the types of entities that we want to have stakeholders. But in general, we're going to be looking for interagency relations, so other government entities and non-government entities that we have regular coordination and overlap with, and community leaders, special interest groups, those are the sort of primary categories. And more specifics in the details, I think you're going to have to flesh out during some early workshops, including with this board.
If I can just throw out a suggestion, now that we have our app that's getting quite a bit of usage from our customer base, if there's a way that we can potentially add like a pop-up when we have our board workshops coming up, so that folks see that and know that there's a meeting coming up where their input can and should be solicited, or if there's a way of better engaging with customers utilizing the technology that we already have. I think that'll be really helpful. We want to get as much input from our customers as we can in this process.
That's great. So the request was using the existing app as a means of pushing notifications,
right?
Marketing.
That's just more of a suggestion. Obviously, we flesh it out at the staff level to see what's most appropriate, but just as an idea, some way that we can make sure that it's top of mind for our customers would be helpful.
Noted. We certainly included the use of new and traditional media formats for all of the public outreach. Definitely noted.
Director Wade? Yes, in our discussions with the public, we note that this is a 2050 plan. We're going on 25 years. That helps put it in context. We look at a total dollar amount, I think would be also helpful. The extraordinary amount of money we plan to spend in the next 25 years toward this water supply. There's a risk that in doing planning, you often look at the existing planning assumptions and guidelines. I think there are several areas there that we need to make some dramatic changes. One is Del Valle Reservoir, which currently will only have 7,500 acre feet of viable storage. That could be increased dramatically. Next, we have the Delta conveyance, and we need to look at alternatives because right now we're relying on a 30 plus foot diameter tunnel at a major cost, which has not been, which was still in the planning phases. We need to have alternatives should that stumble and be extended in time. I'm fully supportive of that project. I serve as an alternate on the Design Construction Authority for the Delta Conveyor, which is the tunnel. But we need to be aware of that. Next is I would hope that we would look into our plans of ways to get out of the lower reaches of Alameda Creek. Open conveyance is always a problem. If you can have the ability to put water in a pipeline, you're far better, far less vulnerable to environmental and other challenges that come along. One of those is the Back to the Future, the Niles Canyon Aqueduct, which could operate, be connected to the South of the Aqueduct and bring water directly to the recharge quarry pits, as it did historically when Spring Valley Water developed the system. Recycled water. We've done a study that recycled water has been in our plans for years, but we always move it to the end. Toilet to tap. It remains in our CIP. We've done a study showing that it's 3 to 4 times the cost of any other water supply. So I would hope we would broaden that definition when we look at that aspect and look at desalination. We've had great fortune, experience with our brackish desal. Even baby desal would be far preferable from a cost and I believe environmental issue than recycled water. My fear is that if you have plans, we have the funding, which we have a funded CIP, we're putting a lot of money into these accounts. Suddenly a grant comes down, you find yourself forced into doing something that's really foolish. That happened with the splatters, it's happening, it will happen in a number of other instances. But I think there's an alternative to not utilizing the rubber dams, having them possibly as a backup. But right now, one of the rubber dams is out of operation for an extended period of time because of the high flows we had in the Christmas time frame. And the other was taken out of service by a kid with a knife. So those are major expenses. It's highly vulnerable, and it need not be the case in the future, particularly in the 2050 plan. Thank you.
And Dirk, we put it out, this is a long plan. And in long range planning, you plan, and we've done pretty darn good. Yes, recycled water has been in our plan. And I hope it stays in the plan. I'm not promoting to do it because the cost has always shown that it's not there. It's a tool possible. A lot of individuals, a lot of groups feel that it's an answer. It's panacea answer, such as desal. Oh, it's the answer. There's problems with desal too. We know it. We've been running it for 20 years. It works great for us. Recycled water would not be working great for us right now. In our 15-year plan 15 years ago. And it remains in our plan 15 years out. I disagree on the fish ladders. Let's be there in the Alameda Creek. There's some other issues involved with this meeting. I trust staff. The phase 2, it's going to be a broad plan. It has to be a broad plan. We don't know what's going to be 50 years from now. I can probably guarantee one thing from 50 years from now, it probably won't be my plan. I wish I could say it would be, but that's probably not going to be the case. And I can only hope that we do it right for our future generations. And the fact that we're even doing it says a lot. Will we get it right? I hope so. Will we get it perfect? No. That's not the plan. The plan is to try and do our best.
That's my comment, my other comments. That's part of our plan. We put a contingency operations and capability element in the plan. But we review all projects and how they support our ability to respond and react to a major catastrophe.
Absolutely.
We need 24/7 power. Look at your power options. You look for power that will give you 24/7 power, or we went with solar, which doesn't, absent batteries. So looking at alternate water supplies that are there, the secondary water supply becomes important. Water connections to the service area if we were to lose connections. And then how do we operate? Do we have 1,000 breaks that we hopefully can recover in 30 days? We need to keep in mind that we need to find some Maybe it's our wells being able to supply fire flows and sanitary flows. This is a major catastrophe. It's not our job to provide potable water. That is the health department. We'll do it, but we want to make sure we have it under their auspices. Our job is to try and find a way to maintain fire flows and sanitary flows in the district, regardless of how much damage was done. I believe we can do that with some strategic placed wells and use our groundwater reservoir. So those are, as a concept, hopefully a chapter, is how we address contingencies and contingency support and make it part of our mindset during our planning and execution of the district. Thank you.
No, I'm good. I think Director Lee's comments are very good and very valid. Contingency, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a wonderful time to do it. And I'm sure turning that over to you, Mr. Nizer, will be a wonderful tool. You'll enjoy that greatly.
So let me offer a few thoughts here. First of all, I think reoperation of Lake Del Valle is an absolute priority for this district. And we need to free up additional capacity there. And we know the ways to do it. So let's get it done. Number two, I support recycled water in general in and for communities where it makes economic sense. And I always put the burden on what is the business case and the economics of recycled water. So for our Tri-City community, it doesn't pencil out. It's the most expensive form of water that we could create as a new supply for our community. But over in the Tri-Valley area, it makes sense. And just right up hopping over the hill, because they have a different set of water supply circumstances and a different cost structure. But we have a good portfolio of different water supply sources, and I will never support recycled water in this community as long as I'm on the board, unless there's an economic case for it. Third, as I've mentioned before, and I handed out copies of the governor's report that he put out last October on, the wild swings in weather between drought and excessive water rain like we had this winter, and planning for the future and climate change. And in that report, he spelled out, please, agencies out there, submit your proposals for desal projects that you have for your service areas before the end of this year, because they're going to issue out grant money to prepare reports. And I think we should be first in line right there to study and re-examine the opportunities of putting in a desal plant in the lower Warm Springs area, as well as in our northern jurisdiction. Although we serve the Tri-City area, our jurisdiction goes all the way up the west side of 880 to close to the Oakland Airport. And there's a wonderful opportunity to take a look at where we could put in a desal plant as a regional project that has regional beneficiaries right next to the power plant that's near the San Mateo Bridge. So I think this has to be part of our long-term outlook in the new 2050 Water Resources Master Plan, but we have some near-term things to try to take advantage of. If it's in the long-term plan, well, then let's apply for those grants right now that will help us get those studies done. And there's a lot of geological work that has to be done, water analyses, on salinity and other factors in those parts of the aquifer. So that's another issue. When it comes to Lower Alameda Creek, I do not support getting out of the creek. And being a little bit of a historian on this water district, Director Weed, I think you're like the lone ranger of all board members ever on advocating for a substitution, getting out of the Lower Alameda Creek with a substitution on the old secret sidewalk. We didn't make $80 million of investment in fish projects and fish passageway and screens and everything in Alameda Creek. To get out of the creek. We did it to protect our water supply interests in the creek. That's why multiple boards over decades have, endorsed going on that path. Now, if there is a supplemental opportunity that has a beneficial, positive case for the district to rehabilitate the secret sidewalk, that's not a small undertaking either. That's going to require tens and tens of millions of dollars, maybe 100. So I absolutely do not favor getting out of Alameda Creek. And then I think that one thing I've been thinking about, Mr. Nizar, since you really brought it up, and I was kind of questioning the staff as to whether it made sense or not, but as I have thought about it and then read other literature, I think doing those studies on the Alameda Creek watershed are really important for this future planning process. And from the knowledge that we gain from that this becomes integrated into the 2050 Water Resources Master Plan. And I hope we retitle it to 2050 Water Resources Master Plan, just instead of just with where it looks amorphous right now without any date assigned to it. So those are my general comments, and when we get to the workshop stages, we'll have an opportunity to provide further input. So those are my principal points. You want to
Thank
give a
you.
rebuttal again?
I think we've delved into one of the early scoping phases, and I look forward to more of this conversation with our facilitated discussions with our consultant team from Wood and Current. Very exciting team. Just add comment that we got a lot of very good consultants, including subs, coming in on this project. I was very happy to read their proposal.
And I want people to understand, John and I have driven thousands of miles together around the state and been to different conferences, including last week. And so we certainly have a good rapport on being able to debate these issues, even if we don't see eye to eye. So most things we do. So I would entertain a motion from a board member for authorizing this professional services agreement.
I'll make a motion to adopt staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. And so now we will turn to item 5.13. And I'll turn this over to, I guess, the general manager.
Yeah, I can get it started. This is something a little unusual for the board. Item 5.13 is authorization to terminate a cooperative agreement with the city of Newark and to enter into professional services agreement for engineering services for the Lindsay Track, Bird Street Main Renewal Project. And I'll ask Mr. Awoke, our Director of Engineering and Technology, to explain all this.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening, board members, community members, and staff. As you might know, the district has a long-standing relationship with City of Newark and in other cities in our service area. In the recent past, the district partnered with the city of Newark for upgrading our water mains as part of their Lindsay Tract neighborhood revitalization project. In June 2021, this board authorized the general manager to enter into a cooperative agreement, essentially to partner with the city and where the city would lead the project and the district would participate in the cost sharing and in the review of design and construction efforts. The city of Newark intended to fund these improvements using assessments, area improvement district assessments. And in January of this year, the city of Newark Council actually voted not to move forward with the project, citing concerns from the community. Nonetheless, we, the district, still want to continue with our project. We want to upgrade our water main. So we will be continuing with our project, which means we have to terminate our agreement with the city and hire or assume the agreement with the consultant directly. Now, the consultant is BKF Consultants. We feel comfortable entering into this agreement with them for 3 reasons. One, we were part of the original selection process, so we feel confident that they can actually perform the design. They have actually done work for us in the past, so we think they can pull this off. And also their price is reasonable, fair and reasonable, so we are recommending that the board award this agreement to BKF. In addition, our legal counsel has determined that the CEQA that we brought forth to the board is in fact in good condition, in good standing, so we don't have to go through another environmental clearance process for the project. With that, I will read the summary of the staff report and staff's recommendation, and I'll take any questions you may have.
So first we'll turn to the public and.
I was going to read the summary.
I'm sorry.
President.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. So the district's water main renewal program includes the replacement of approximately 6,700 feet of water mains on portions of George Avenue, Magnolia Street, Mulberry Street, Olive Street, and Birch Street in the city of Newark, the Lindsay Tract and Birch Street main renewal project. The existing water mains include 4-inch to 8-inch diameter asbestos cement pipelines aged between 60 to 70 years, with service laterals, water meters, fire hydrants, valves, and appurtenances along the alignment. The district's water mains in the project area are approaching the end of their useful life and are in need of renewal. The district entered into a cooperative agreement with the city to provide for a joint effort between the city and the district to complete the design and construction of the water system installation as part of the city's Lindsay Tract roadway and green infrastructure improvements project, which includes reconstruction of the same streets with new curb, gutter, sidewalk, and stormwater infrastructure along the same alignment. Design work was completed under an agreement between the city and the project engineering consultant for both projects through the 90% design deliverable under the cooperative agreement. However, the city is no longer moving forward with the project. Therefore, a new professional services agreement is needed between the district and the project engineering consultant to complete the design and engineering related services for the project. There is adequate funding in the budget for these services. The item was reviewed recently with the Engineering and Information Technology Committee on June 7, 2023. This project will help meet the district's strategic plan goal 1.1, efficiently manage and maintain our infrastructure to ensure reliability. So staff recommendation is by motion: 1, authorize the general manager to terminate the cooperative agreement between the City of Newark and Alameda County Water District for cost sharing for water main installation work for the Lindsay Tract roadway and green infrastructure improvements project. And 2, authorize the general manager to execute a professional services agreement with BKF engineers in an amount not to exceed $129,922 for engineering services for the Lindsay Tract and Birch Street main renewal projects, job number 21348. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Awok. So now we'll open it up for any public comments. And I don't see any online or here in the boardroom. So if I may, I'd like to open up with some comments and questions. Okay. So I would like to understand, once we complete the engineering work, and I certainly want to see us get to the finish line, so I'm we'll vote for approval here. Will there be any obstacles for us to go in and actually do the main renewal and replacement work that was scheduled?
We don't anticipate, in fact, what we've heard from the community meetings the city held was that the community is very supportive of the main renewal, the water main replacement. So we don't anticipate any resistance per se from the community, or as far as permitting with the city is concerned.
Okay, and second, will we have any obligation to the city for resurfacing of the streets, putting in new sidewalks, or anything regarding medians or anything like that?
We will know the specifics as part of the encroachment permit process, but typically with the city of Newark, we've only been responsible for restoring the trench that we used to install our mains. So we don't anticipate any ancillary work like sidewalks or paving the entire street in this case.
Well, as I read in the report, they are indefinitely suspending this CIP project for the city. So I would like it clearly understood that they're not going to offload work from that program back onto ACWD. That's my concern. And so I also want to ask a question of our general counsel, if I may, just a very simple question. Is there any possibility of any liability to ACWD down the road where City of Newark can make a claim against us for anything?
So I think there would be nothing unique about this main renewal project than any of our other main renewal projects, just because we previously had an agreement with the city of Newark and now that's not going to go forward. So we have the same potential exposure to liabilities we would for any main renewal project, but nothing unique because of this situation.
Right. So I think it's important to understand the politics behind what happened here. And I hate to say I told you so, but in June of 2021, when we approved this, I made some comments at the time and I said, I'm not in a position to tell the City Council of Newark what to do, but I thought this was extremely poor governance, that you're setting up a special assessment district to take care of a neighborhood CIP project. And the whole reason cities are formed is to share the cost of what goes on around a community. Fremont is, close to 100 square miles. Are we suddenly going to say because Niles is the oldest district that we're going to set up an assessment district around there because we have to replace all the pipes and upgrade the neighborhoods? And I said, if you do this for any city, and if City of Newark starts this process, this was the first time they were going to do this, and they follow through on other parts of the city, pretty soon your city is balkanized into different assessment districts with different assessments associated with the costs of those CIP projects. I think the purpose of a city is to forecast all of its CIP requirements and then budget appropriately and set up sinking funds and plan for those projects down the road. You don't just say we're going to do a project and then we're going to go collect the money down the road from the special assessment. So what happened? These neighborhoods turned on their council. I knew this was going to blow up in their face, and it resulted in a change in membership of the City Council of Newark. I'm not putting any blame on any single person, but at the time 2 years ago, I was just shaking my head and I said, this is no way to govern a city. And now it's led to the termination of this agreement and to indefinite suspension of the improvements to these very old neighborhoods that needed it desperately. So those are my comments. I will vote to approve this.
Mine is a technical comment. I would, as we do the engineering design, be aware of the potential for the groundwater table to increase significantly, inundating your, saturating your water lines. And be interested to see we're in hazard mitigation study now with the 3 cities. And hopefully that can be tied in to identify a response to rising sea levels.
Yeah, that's a good comment. We in fact learned a lot from the Sousa Concord project we did. We completed, about 6-9 months ago. So we are incorporating some dewatering practices and accounting for that in our specifications for sure.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I tend to agree with Director Sethy. I don't particularly think it was a good idea politically to try to do this as a assessment district. Additionally, I went to one of the public meetings, and this was before my committee yesterday. And I went to one of those public meetings. I think this area is a fascinating section of Newark. There are no curbs, there are no gutters. And quite a few of the neighbors that were at that meeting were adamant that's what they wanted. They didn't want their neighborhood to change. And they were 100% behind our project. They were very happy when we were going to go in there and replace our pipes. But boy, when it came to their curbs and gutters, it was like, no, we don't want it. So I'm not surprised this went this way. I mean, obviously, everybody I don't think was there saying against it. But when you had the numbers that there were, and there were significant numbers of people who didn't want this. And it's very interesting. I think I was over on Birch Street. It's a very interesting area. But like you said, Niles is a different area. You had an area that didn't have curbs, it didn't have gutters. And this is what the people really liked about their area. It was different. And they wanted to keep it that way. And it was like the city came in with this, oh, we're going to do this for you. And they're like, we don't want it. And of course, then they said, also, we're going to do this for you. You get to pay for it. That didn't help either. But as far as our project goes, the city, the residents there were all behind it. I think there's not going to be that many issues with it. They just didn't want the curbs and gutters. They would like our water main. They were very supportive of the main. But one of the things we have to be careful when we're working in there, though, is that, yeah, they're a very vocal group. And they like things the way they are. So I think as we proceed, we want to be careful not to assume that they want what maybe everybody else wants because they like what they have. So I'm sure we've worked. Actually, the staff was over there. We had staff over there. They all heard that. They made sure they all heard. So interesting, and I'm all for trying to work with the cities. Not surprised this is getting terminated. Will it go through in the future? Perhaps, eventually, but probably not for at least 20 years. I just don't think they were ready for it. So with that, I support it.
I'll move this item forward, 5.13.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Weed,
All right.
and Sethy.
Aye. We're gonna move on to item 5.14. And after we're done with this item, I'm gonna call for a short break, just to let folks know.
Sure thing. 5.14 is consideration of terms and conditions for an updated memorandum of understanding between the Alameda County Water District and the Alameda County Water District Operators Association to incorporate changes to state law and the CalPERS Health Benefit Program and to walk us through this, Mr. Wunderlich, our Director of Finance and Administration.
Great, thank you. So the district periodically meets and confers with its represented employees regarding changes to district benefits or programs required to comply with changes in state laws or other changes outside the control of the district. During the 2022 legislative session, multiple new laws were approved that required changes to the memorandum of understanding between the district and the Alameda County Water District Operators Association. Those specifically were legal changes related to bereavement leave and the use of a designated person for sick leave and California Family Rights Act leave. Additionally, CalPERS made prior changes to its health plans by reducing its preferred provider organization offerings from 3 options to 2 options, which also necessitates changes to the memorandum of understanding. And these changes are in alignment with changes previously made by the board for our other represented employee group operating engineers local 3, as well as for unrepresented district employees. And so approval of this item will help achieve district strategic plan goal 4, improve workforce recruitment, maintain retention, and enhance employee engagement. And so the recommendation this evening on this item is by motion, authorize the general manager or designee to finalize an updated memorandum of understanding between the district and the Alameda County Water District Operators Association to incorporate 1, changes required by state law, and 2, changes to the CalPERS Health Benefits Program. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so first we'll turn to public input. I don't see any hands up from anybody. So any board input here? Questions? None for me either. So I'll move this item again.
I'll second.
Directors Gunther.
Aye.
Akbari.
Aye.
Weed.
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. And with that, why don't we just take a quick 10-minute break? We'll come back at close to 7:45. Are we on recording? Okay, we're resuming our meeting at 7:46 here in the evening. And we will move on to reports on the agenda. Are there 6.1 is board committee reports. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, how about operational reports? You want to say something on the district, on the hardness?
It was interesting.
You're ecstatic?
I was, I did have a question on that. I understand that it's been with the treatment plant down, we've been using a lot of HHE. But yeah, those numbers are,
I thought you might like those.
I
get used to
don't
them.
recognize those colors.
Yeah, and just for a little background, if you remember, TP2 was offline until the 8th of the month. So during that time of the month, we were taking much more SFPUC water directly into our system. So that brought those numbers down. And then when treatment plant number 2 did start up, we've actually seen very low hardness. If you notice on the table, TP2 I think is 77 or something. Just, you know, that happens sometimes, especially after a big winter. We're getting a lot of snow melt and direct runoff. So the water coming into the plant is fairly soft. So that's all contributed to the lower numbers you might be seeing.
What's the turbidity been like lately at TP2?
Nothing unusual. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but we haven't had any issue with turbidity at this point.
Great. So I see under 6.3, there's no staff reports, so we'll turn to the general manager. 6.4.1.
Okay, great. We have 3 GM reports to provide for the board this evening. Quickly on the first one is the Delta Conveyance Project tour opportunities. And you all received an email earlier today about opportunities that Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority is putting together for tours, really along the alignment of the Delta Conveyance project, pointing out some certain areas of interest, including Bethany Reservoir and where certain work is planned. And so what they're really trying to do is put together one tour every month. They're telling us they plan to extend those monthly tours through the end of the fiscal year. But right now they're really trying to set up and fill the tours for September and October. And what they're looking for, what they have in mind is electeds from the various sort of member agencies that might participate in these tours, learn a little bit more about the project, see the areas where the work will happen, so they can better, talk to their constituents about the project and be a bit more knowledgeable. And so they're trying to coordinate these tours. We have staff. You received the email from Christina Ureno, who's the office supervisor for our engineering technology services and water resources group. And she's working on coordinating all of this. So she's reached out to you all for any interest in participating in those tours. Again, the first one coming up is September. It's on September 19th, the first one that they're looking to fill. And September 19th, I know that both directors, Sethy and Weed, suggested they might want to be on that tour. It is the same day as our Finance and Administration Committee meeting. Not to say we can't reschedule that meeting, but the other issue is there was a suggestion that the ACWD folks that participate in it would be great to get us together with the same tour as folks from Valley Water. Valley Water has indicated that they're not going to be able to make the September 19th tour date because they have a conflict. They have a special board meeting that evening. So I don't need all kinds of answers from everybody right now. I just wanted to call your attention to the fact that you received this email. We're looking to coordinate and schedule those meetings. We want to make sure that we have only 2 directors at any one tour. And that's also serves to allow other agencies to send their folks too. We are planning to have some staff participate, especially as there are openings across the next several months, so that staff is hearing the same thing that directors are hearing, and we're as up to speed on the project as possible. So that I just wanted to call your attention to that email and solicit any interest in your attending those tours.
Well, you know that Director Weed and I do wish to go. I was told by the chief of staff for the Delta Conveyance project that she has been organizing 10 to 15 people at a time. So staff is certainly welcome on these excursions. And regardless of where Valley Water is, because they are so indecisive about things, I don't want to depend upon them for a timely answer. If John and I can go on the 19th and we can bump up our finance meeting to Monday, if that's possible.
Maybe what we'll do is
it later in the week.
Maybe the next day, the 20th, might be a little bit better if you're all available,
Yeah.
but we can work that out. We
Yeah.
got plenty of time.
We have other board members as well.
That might be better the day after, because we're probably going to have to go up the evening before to be at the starting point for,
It is in the morning.
yeah.
Yeah, in Sacramento.
Yeah. So the day after would be good, but like I said in my email, the earlier that Director Weed and I can go out there, the better, because Director Weed serves on the Design and Construction Authority and I serve on the Finance Authority for the Delta Conveyance Project. And that still leaves the opportunity for the 3 other board members, if you wish to go in October with Valley Water.
Do we know when the October dates are yet?
Don't have dates yet. We've asked for at least a tentative schedule for the upcoming months. We don't.
'Cause I also am interested, although I do feel it probably more important at this point that Director Weed and Director Sethy attend, based on their positions with the project. But I'm also interested in getting more information. I'd be interested in one of these tours.
Okay.
Willing though to.
You as well, Director Akbari. Okay, so what you'll hear from Ms. Urano as more information comes available. In the meantime, we will work with the DCA to sign up both directors Weed and Sethy
Great.
for
great.
September 19th, and then we'll work with you all on rescheduling the Finance Committee.
Super. That's quite a comprehensive all-day tour starting early in the morning and you know, you hear about these projects and you can even see them in reports and maps and everything else. But until you have boots on the ground and actually can visually see things like Director Weed and I did last week at the site's reservoir project site, you don't really comprehend the dimensions, the challenges that are out in the field. It's a whole different experience. So thank you very much for helping to organize that, and especially Ms. Urano.
Yeah, she's doing a great job so far, and information continues to come in.
Mm-hmm.
Second item we've got is some good news, and I'll let Mr. Awoke talk about our CMAA award for fish passage projects.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening, board members, once again. I'm happy to report that the district's lower Alameda Creek Fish Passage Improvements Project was awarded the 2023 Project Achievement Award from the Construction Management Association of America, also known as CMAA, the Northern California chapter, under the program management category. According to CMAA, the Project Achievement Awards highlight the best of the best, those projects that serve as an example to the industry and are true pinnacles of excellence and innovation. This award is a testament to not only the overall successful management of the program over many years, but also the effective collaboration and coordination among the district, the contractor, the construction manager, the designer, and all the stakeholders that played a major role in the successful implementation of the program. In addition, it speaks to the value of the longstanding partnerships the district has built with our sister agencies, funding partners, and the community at large. The district project manager, Mr. Shane Oneski, is in Sacramento as we speak this evening at the CMA NorCal Project Achievements Award Scholarship and Industry Celebration Gala to receive the award on behalf of the district. So I want to take this opportunity to thank the project team for their continued dedication and commitment to this project, as well as the board's support over the years. And that's my report. Thank you.
It's about as hot off the press as it can get, as staff are there right now receiving the award.
Well, it's quite a testament and achievement of not only for the engineering department and project management team, but you know, every department gets involved in something like this. And not to put too much burden on our PR staff, but I mean, I looked through the LICA committee report from the last month and all the articles that went out and press releases on all the fish related things going on in Alameda Creek. And we got a lot of coverage, including, I think, from Tri-City Voice. But it would really be nice to highlight this with some kind of press release. It really is one of those awards that's the best of the best in your industry. You can't beat it. The Cadillac Award. Any comments? None?
I mean, I think it highlights the importance of the project as well. And there's been a little bit of debate about that tonight. But yeah, excellent work by staff, and very well done.
I think it highlights how difficult it really was. It wasn't a simple task. It was incredible effort and a lot of working together to make this thing happen. One goes out there, you could, the fact we were able to get out there while it was being built was great. Because now you can't even see now what it was, how difficult it was.
It's because most of it is underwater.
Yeah. And it's complex. It's not a simple fish ladder.
It's like you're seeing the top of a submarine or something. Who again is accepting the award?
Shane Oneski, the project manager.
Shane
is-
Oneski,
is-
okay.
yeah.
Well, make sure that he hauls that thing in to the boardroom, the next board meeting.
We're kind of running out of room on our trophy case for the fish passage project alone. But it is nice to be recognized like that, you know, from all these different elements of the related industries, right? Aqua, obviously, ASCE, CMAA, and so forth. So we're happy to report out on that. We will bring it in to show the board soon.
Yeah, great. And now the 6.4.3.
Yeah, this will be an update on collections related customer outreach, and I'll turn it over to our Director of Finance and Administration, John Wonderlich.
Yes, so staff has continued to work on the processes related to using the property tax roll for collecting on delinquent accounts. And so last week marked another milestone in that process because we're looking to do that for the first time this year. And so we sent a letter to customers with a balance that was more than 60 days past due in those owner occupied single family residential accounts, advising them of their account status and that if they don't pay, that their balance will be referred to the property tax roll for collection. So we sent out letters on 337 accounts, totaling approximately 41,000 in past due balances that would be referred to the tax bill. We've seen a pretty strong response to that letter in terms of customers paying their bill to avoid the referral to the tax roll. And so just within a week of putting that in the mail, we've had 92 of those 337 accounts have paid to get current. And so the number of accounts as of today is down to 245, collecting about $31,000. So it's been a pretty effective outreach mechanism. And in July, we will be before the board for the board to approve a resolution authorizing staff to make those referrals for the remaining accounts that still have a balance that needs to be addressed.
And those will be sent to the county.
Correct. Yeah. So
August 1 or something.
correct. So staff has been working with county staff over the past several months to understand their requirements and kind of file transfer mechanisms and kind of those different technical aspects. And so we're well positioned, and we now know kind of what the total potential volume is that could be referred.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any questions from the board?
Yes, hopefully we can continue, expand the program even further and eventually eliminate referrals to collection agencies. But specifically, next expansion might encourage us to consider master meters where we have multiple customers, but only one payer. And if we could do that, positive.
Any other comments? Any other-
Okay, that's pretty much it. I think the board also received an email from Shireen Gonzalez, our public affairs supervisor, about a whole bunch of additional activities and community engagement that's coming up over the next several weeks. So of course, you're invited to participate in any of that. On the near term, we have our July 4th parade. The district will have an entry again this year. Mr. Wonderlich and I will be driving the district vehicles, and if should you choose to participate, and I encourage you if you can, you'll have a role there. We have a surprise for you, and we're looking forward to that. But there's lots and lots of other things happening. Just look for that email to stay up to date. And that's all.
You're not going to have any kind of Halloween costume for us this evening.
I said it's a surprise.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to directors' comments, reports, etc. I've got a number here, but does anybody, Director Akbari, do you have any reports?
I don't have any.
Agenda requests?
Not for today.
Okay. Jim?
I'm just gonna sit and listen very jealously to Region 2 program.
Okay. So on 7.1, I went up to Sacramento for the first in-person meeting that we had of the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority since the pandemic shutdown. And as chair of this 11-member board, I had worked ahead of time with the executive director to set the agenda, and we took care of a lot of miscellaneous items, set the budget for the year, and then the remainder of our meeting was essentially in an hour-and-a-half closed-door session, which I am not permitted to talk about in this public session. What I can say that is public information is that there is a lot of focus on the DRW validation lawsuits that have been pending in Superior Court in Sacramento. And the Sierra Club, along with a coalition of about 40 environmental groups, filed these lawsuits. They are the appellants. Actually, DWR filed the lawsuit on behalf of itself to get a court judgment to validate its rights to build the Delta Conveyance System and finance it. And so the challengers, the appellants, are all of these environmental groups. So far, over the last 3 years, most of these the appellant arguments have been dismissed in summary judgment. And so we were down to the final issues that they have been contending with. And just by coincidence, the very week we were meeting, May 18th, it went to trial that Monday and was concluded during that week. So the judge who supervised all of this over the last 5 years indicated that he would make a formal decision and issue it sometime in the September to October timeframe. So we're kind of waiting on pins and needles for the outcome of that lawsuit, which will likely trigger these same parties going to the California Appellate Court to try and overturn it if they need to or want to. But until that's resolved, we really cannot move forward in an assertive way on financing, although we have been discussing various options in closed-door session. So that's my report. We will not have a meeting in June. We may not even have a meeting until September, so I'll keep you updated. On Los Vaqueros Reservoir, where Mr. Wunderlich is my backup, we had quite a busy agenda this last time around. We approved the appointment of the program manager, which is so essential to this project. We got through our entire budget discussion, and we will probably pass that next week. I must say, this project is really moving smoothly in every aspect. And so as the treasurer for that board, we are now going through setting up our banking relationships. We considered a number of different banks and made a decision last month that we would go with Morgan Stanley Chase. And so I'm working with the executive director right now on getting the bank account set up for that just this very week. And I also wanted to point out that engineering efforts on this project are really well underway right now. The first construction activity is expected to start next July. And the three major aspects of the project are the pump station number one, which the design on that is pretty much complete. The second part of the project is the Bethany Transfer Pipeline, and there's something like 60% complete on that. And then the last is the official raise of the dam. Importantly, Contra Costa Water District has farmed out each of these three principal aspects of the project to a different engineering firm. So these are all very professional, the biggest players in the industry with working on this. And East Bay Mud has been putting in a lot of oversight into the engineering efforts as well. And I know that we have a monthly engineering oversight meeting. Maybe at some point, I was going to suggest that, because I think it might be of interest to all of us here, is to have an engineering update on the project, looking at it from the perspective of Mr. Woke, you as head of our engineering department. I think that would be a very informative presentation for all. So at some point during this next year, as Director Weed was alluding to, we're going to have to really get into what is the actual business case for ACWD. We're now getting down to the final year of off ramps. If anyone wants to exit from the project, otherwise we have to make a commitment, that will carry us through the tear down and rebuild of this reservoir, which likely will not be completed until 2032 or 2033. So that's my update on this very important project for the entire Bay Area.
I could just note quickly, remind the board and the public that at the July board meeting, staff is planning on doing a bit of an overview as to where we are now. We're going to do our best to share as updated a business case as we can. But at the same meeting, staff's going to be presenting the multi-party agreement amendment to the board for approval. This will carry us through, keep us going until such time as we have the service agreements in place and be able to work through the JPA to finance the project.
Right. This is amendment number 2.
I think it's number 5.
Oh, 5.
Yeah.
5 that we approved last month. Yeah. So just to reiterate, this 8-member board is one of the largest regional efforts that anyone has undertaken in the state of California. It includes San Francisco PUC, East Bay Mud, Contra Costa Water District, ACWD, Santa Clara Valley Water District, Zone 7, Grasslands Water District, and the San Luis Delta Mendota Water Authority, which represents 29 different interests going all the way deep down into the San Joaquin Valley, including the largest water district down there, the largest one in the nation by area, Westlands Water District. So this is, oh, and I forgot to mention all of the wildlife refuges that will be beneficiaries of this project as well in the Central Valley. So very important project, and I'm very excited to actually be, plugged right in with this fast moving project. So item 7.3, Director Weed, why don't I let you go first because I am all talked out.
Okay. Let me first of all follow up with a comment on the Las Vaqueras. San Francisco is taking a major portion of this, I believe 40% of the total project. They're a major player. which means that they're going to be bringing water down to the South Bay Aqueduct. If they're to transport water. That raises a lot of issues and potential opportunities and discussions which we should be having with San Francisco and how they plan to implement their facilities and what other additional facilities are going to be needed in our neighborhood to meet San Francisco's requirements and where there might be some potential interties with that development. So I would encourage, it's not part of the LVE project, but that we be meeting with San Francisco and the San Francisco water planners as to how they can, what they're going to need to implement their participation in LVE and how it's going to interplay with the South Bay Aqueduct and potentially be mutually beneficial to Alameda County Water District.
Well, one of those things that we might want to explore with them is if they're pulling in this water, it has to be treated someplace, and maybe our mothballed Mission San Jose treatment plant #1 up on this Sonol grade is where the water should be treated before it's delivered to their other customers.
Exactly, that was been brought up in discussion, but whatever, I have not heard of any recent discussions we've had with San Francisco on what the implications are going to be when they buy into that and start being participating.
So how would you like to lead off on the sites
Okay.
reservoir tour?
Sites Reservoir Tour, which we had on, went up on the 31st of May and had the tour on the 1st of June. It is the state of Jefferson, big signs as you go into Williams and Maxwell. You're in a area of secessionist, but they do have this dam project. Big issue for that is the request for 1.5 million acre-feet of water rights. It's a seasonal water supply, and that is to be determined by DWR in the during.
Actually, Director Weed, this is hot off the press. On Friday, the State Water Board issued their water rights take permit.
Okay, that's one of the
The day
largest.
after we were on the tour.
Okay, good. That is
So
one
they
of the
were having a
large-
big celebration.
Yeah. That was one of the largest decisions the DWR has made in its history. It's a big, big chunk of water. Comment was made at by Jerry Brown, not the former governor, but the former general manager of Contra Costa, who is now manager of the sites project, that they did not need the conveyance of the tunnel. They had inflow abilities in the delta. I asked the question, and which was not answered, I felt, that had they quantified the amount of sea level rise? At what point with sea level rise would the through delta conveyance no longer be reliable? There was no answer to that question. Delta Master, former Delta Master, has indicated that if they have 2 feet of sea level rise, they've lost the delta. It'll become an inland salton sea, which implies that through delta conveyance will not be available. We've had environmental consultants tell us we should be looking at 84 inches or 7 feet of sea level rise within our planning horizon. So we're not participating in sites. I saw no reason for us to participate in sites based on the presentation we had on the 1st of June. Thank you.
So if we can step back in time here, put things in perspective. In 2010, California voters for the first time failed to pass a major water bond in quite a number of years. And in 2014, that's because we were in the recession. Even I was opposed to it, running for the board at the time until the state paid off much of its debts. So, but in 2014, I was supportive, and it was passed by a good margin of California voters, multi-billion-dollar bond 2.7 billion of that was set aside for water storage projects. And of the 8 that were approved, 1 dropped out because they couldn't get the local financing. And now we're down to 7 that are funded under the direction of the California Water Commission. And the 2 that are right at the forefront of getting off the ground are Los Vaqueros Reservoir. That's the #1 project in the state moving forward. And what really surprised me was how far advanced the sites project has come, because it was really kind of, you didn't even know if the project was going to survive or not 3-4 years ago. But now they've got the largest award from the California Water Commission from that grant, or from those set of bonds. Federal government is coming in a big way. And this is a $4 billion project. Los Vaqueros Reservoir is 1.4 billion presently. And I said Los Vaqueros is going to start construction next summer. Well, guess what? Sites is going to start construction activity 1 year later in 2025. So that's right around the corner. And this will be the largest new dam built in California, I think going back to the 1960s, 70s, something like that. And 1.5 million acre feet of water. That is off of the Sacramento River, so it's not damming any rivers. And Director Weed and I were able to go. We had 60 people from around the state of California that were on this Aqua Region 2 field trip, and took us on 2 bus loads out to the center of this valley, where former Governor Brown just coincidentally has his large ranch overlooking this new reservoir. That's a historic family property going back to the gold rush days. And so sitting in the middle of this bowl, we were told, look to the top of the hill. If this is filled with water, you would now be 300 feet underwater in this new reservoir. So that was kind of interesting to envision. And lastly, I was surprised at how well all the financing has come together and how far along they are on all of the engineering work. And then they have a very large board of directors and interested parties too. They have 22 different water districts that are investors, and they have a list of about a dozen water agencies that are on a waiting list to get in. On the South Bay Aqueduct, both Zone 7 and Santa Clara Valley Water District are listed as investors. I don't see a reason for us to get involved in that project like Director Weed, especially if we can get more operational volume out of Lake Del Valle. But it's an interesting project to be aware of and what's going on. And tangentially, if we are in a severe drought, there's some interesting opportunities for ACWD if people are doing water transfers and there's a water market out there and we need, a certain volume of water at a certain time, like an insurance policy or something that we can exercise. So, but I don't see the need to be involved right now. If there's any other opportunity, I would encourage other board members, go out there. Wear your cowboy boots, by the way.
Rattlesnakes predominate.
Yeah, they had.
We were warned repeatedly to stay on the pavement.
So that's my report on Maxwell, unless there's some questions from the staff about that tour. if there's a chance for staff to go out there, I would encourage that too. Maybe that can be arranged with Jerry Brown, the one with the hair.
So I encourage you, if you do go out, which I've not done, is take a trip to Knight's Landing, which just above Woodland, where the proposed outfall for the release of the water, if they do a through Delta connection, get an idea of that water then will flow through and be captured by at Clifton Corridor, someplace farther south.
You know, what's interesting to me is that Governor Pat Brown, Jerry Brown's father, first proposed this under his administration in 1957. It's taken this long for it to come to fruition. But along the way, they did make investments in two different canal systems that are offshoots of the Sacramento River to help with all of the rice farmers in the Sacramento Delta and everything. And so a lot of the plumbing has already been done, except for one extension from these canals that would pump water over the hill into this new reservoir. So it's taken like 60 years. Along the way, they've done some very important engineering projects on these canals that are all concrete lined. And so from that perspective, the project gets to be expedited too. You don't have to rebuild all those plumbing parts. Okay, with that, we will move to a closed door session, and I'm going to turn it over to our general counsel to lead us into that.
Great, thank you. It is now 8:25 and the board is going to convene into closed session pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, agency designated representatives, board president Sethy, vice president Gunther, and the unrepresented employee is the general manager. We can now convene into closed session.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Alcorn, for attending. Okay, we're back in session at 8:40 from arriving back from closed door session. And I'm going to turn it over to our general counsel to give a report from that session.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. The board convened in closed session pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, agency designated representatives, board president Sethy, vice president Gunther, unrepresented employee, general manager, and in the closed session, no action was taken. Okay, so we can now move on to the open session item 9.1.
Right, and this is the consideration of a resolution approving the second amendment to employment agreement with the general manager. And again, I'll turn it back to our general counsel to read out the second amendment to the employment agreement.
Yeah, that would be great. So just as background, on June 10th, 2021, the district entered into an employment agreement with Ed Stevenson to employ him as the district's general manager. On June 9th, 2022, the district and the general manager entered into the first amendment to the employment agreement to increase the general manager's compensation based on the general manager's strong performance. The district and the general manager desire to amend the employment agreement to increase the general manager's compensation from step 3 to step 4 of the salary schedule to an annual salary of $298,424.11, effective the pay period that includes July 1, 2023. No cost of living increase will be applied. All other terms and conditions of the employment agreement will remain the same. The board may discuss this item, and the board may consider a motion to adopt the resolution approving the second amendment to the employment agreement between the district and Ed Stevenson. So I'll now turn it over to the board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miyake. So at this point, are there any comments or questions from board members? Seeing none, would somebody like to make a motion for approval?
I'll
Go ahead.
make the motion to adopt staff recommendation. Or not staff recommendation, to adopt.
Negotiator.
Yeah, the motion would be
This
to
is-
adopt the resolution approving the second amendment to the employment agreement with the general manager.
I will adopt the resolution as stated by our general counsel.
This is as recommended by the board.
By the board.
By the, yeah, the
My
negotiators.
apologies.
So I will second the motion made by Director Akbari happily. And so,
Directors Gunther,
aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye. Congratulations, Mr. Stevenson.
Thank
have
you
a
very
contract.
much, President Sethy. And this is a little bit of an unusual item. It's a little awkward, certainly for me. But I just wanted to say I really do appreciate the support of this board, the trust that you all put in me, and your support of the organization too. So thank you.
And dang it, you get it right all the time.
It's good to know.
I know you grew up in Hollister country when you use the word dang and it
Dang,
ends up
yeah.
on the front page of the Mercury News.
Believe me, I received plenty of phone calls and emails about, what's going on down there. You guys in your backwoods language.
All right, with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.